Good morning to everyone. We'll give people another minute or two to get onto the call, and then we'll begin. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the third in our webinar series celebrating 10 years of the implementation of RDA in Israel. We're in webinar mode today. Please put any questions you may have in the Q&A section. Feel free to post your questions in either English or in Hebrew. Questions in Hebrew I will translate for Renate when I read them out. Welcome to our guests from Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. We're very happy to have you celebrate with us. And thank you to the University of Haifa for hosting this webinar series. Our, of course, very, very grateful thanks go to our speaker today, Renate Behrens, who will be talking to us about the Bibliographic Universe. Renate is the first non-Anglo-American chair of the RDA Steering Committee. She's been involved in the ongoing development of RDA since 2010 on a national, European, and international level. Since 2015, she's served as a member of the RDA Steering Committee, initially as the representative of the German-speaking community from 2016 until the end of 2021 as the European representative, and now as the chair. Renate is also active in several IFLA working groups on standardization, including the Advisory Committee on Standards and the Cataloging section. And over the summer, she was awarded the IFLA Scroll of Appreciation in honor of her distinguished contribution to IFLA for her extensive achievements, expertise, dedication, and service, substantially impacting the area of international standards for cataloging, including resource description and access. We are very honored that you're joining our celebration and that you've agreed to come talk to us today. Over to you.
Thank you, Ahava, to your kind words. And first of all, Shalom Israel. Hello and good morning to everybody there outside listening to us. And thank you very much for this introduction. And not at least, congratulations to you, to your community for 10 years of RDA implementation. And I can say the Israeli community is one of the first and one of the most effective communities in implementing RDA, and we can learn a lot from you, what you are doing. And so congratulations for your great work. And I know Ahava is a big player behind all this, and I had the honor and the pleasure to work with her over several years. And as Europeans or non-Anglo-American people, we are very happy that we could join for so many years this community, the RDA community. And I think, Ahava, we can say that we achieved some things for our communities and in the direction of internationalization. And we will hear about this in the following presentation as well. Raise your questions in the Q&A section. As Ahava told you, we can talk about this all at the end of my presentation. If you have something you do not understand, or if you would like me to repeat something or whatever, just let Ahava know. She will help me to answer your questions. So don't hesitate to ask any questions you would like to raise up. So I will now try to share my screen, and I will be happy to have a feedback from the organizers if this will work.
We're seeing the screen, but not the full screen. Now we're seeing the full screen.
Okay, so that's fine. That's great. So we can start. Yes, I would like to talk to you about the bibliographic universe. That's a big word, the universe. That's a big thing. And we will see what this will mean more concretely. But when I remember the times when I started library school many, many years ago, I didn't know a lot about the job of a librarian. When you only are a user of a certain library, public library, you know, the librarians there giving books to people, bringing them back to the shelves, nothing else. And when I started at library school at university, really a universe opened up for me, and I got knowledge about what is behind all this and what people in libraries and other cultural institutions are doing and what is needed to bring these resources, as we call them nowadays, because these are no longer only books, to the users, and how this all fits together, how our work is organized and what we are doing concretely, and what we are doing all together worldwide, internationally nowadays. I would like to give you a glance about the work that we are doing. What do we mean by bibliographic universe? Just some definitions in advance. The bibliographic universe refers to the complete set of bibliographic information available in libraries, archives, or other information systems. It encompasses all the materials that are catalogued, indexed, or referenced. And here you can see how broad this is, what is meant by bibliographic universe. When we're coming a bit more closer, what is this bibliographic information? It's a really general words, and perhaps many people will not know what does this mean. And here we have some keywords here in this definition. Bibliographic information refers to the key details that identify and describe a specific works. We have here identify and describe. These are keywords for our work. It serves to provide all the essential data someone might need to locate, reference, or cite the work. Here we have the point of view from the users. That's very important and not to forget. Bibliographic information typically follows a standard format. And here we have these words: standard format, standardization. And what does this mean? We will have a look. These are very broad and very theoretical definitions about bibliographic information. Perhaps I try to say it in a more simple words, record and describe what the resource entails, what it's about. That's important. And it may be important to add information that is helpful and useful for users, because we have to have always the focus on the user. We're not doing these bibliographic work for ourselves. We are doing it for potential users. And users coming nowadays from all around the world, they are coming virtually. For long times, users has been those people who are going to a library, going through the door, going into the library, but that's not what it is nowadays. And in the definition was mentioned the other cultural institutions. Libraries are not working and existing nowadays on their own and alone for themselves. For users nowadays, it doesn't matter where a resource is placed, if it's in a library or in an archive or perhaps in a museum. They just want to get the information. And that we have to keep in our minds for our work. Our world has become broader. The information world has become much more broader than it was, let's say, 30, 40 years ago. And that we have to keep in our minds. Let us have glance some years back to have a more clear framework where we are coming from. In history, libraries, they were buildings. They were not a set of data. You had to go there, and they were very exclusive. Many of them were very small compared to the collections we are having nowadays with all the digital possibilities we are having. They were much more smaller, and they were very exclusive. You have to keep in mind that libraries for a long time, and perhaps it started 100 years ago, not longer, that libraries opened up for everybody. It started in the middle of the 19th century, especially in the Anglo-American communities, that everybody can go to a library. Everybody have access to all the resources. In former times, for long times, libraries were very exclusive and the resources had been open only for some people. And me, as a woman, I can tell you, even at the end of the 19th century, in the beginning of the 20th century, women were not allowed to use the family library on their own. They had to ask the father or the brother, the man in the family, to let them have a look at some resources they selected for her sister or wife or whoever. So fortunately, we got over this, and but we have to keep into mind that this was the context for a long, long time in the library sector. And so, as the libraries were so exclusive and so small, and the librarians, they were head of these, they were the keepers of the treasure in the libraries, and they had the catalog in their minds for a long time. And we have an example here in Europe. It's the French National Library, which is a very old national library compared to perhaps the German National Library, which is a bit more than 100 years old. French National Library goes back to the 14th century, and it was a collection for the king, sure. And so the librarians, they had an overview over the collection, and they don't need special catalogs. Beginning with the French Revolution, when they put all the books from the churches and these environments, they brought it to Paris in a special stack. And so they had to think about how to describe these collection and what books they are having, where they are, what they are about. And so they started to have a library catalog. And I brought you here, I would like to show you here a first example of a very old library catalog. It's from a small city in Germany, in the north of Germany. It's a small but a very important library with many, many very old and ancient resources. But these first catalogs, handwritten from the librarian, no other people were allowed to look at it. They were more or less inventories, and they served to prove what the library is having, what's in the library. Today, you all know that's very much different, very much more complex, and the cataloging of collections cannot seen as an end of itself. We always have to keep in mind that it is a service. But who is behind this universe? What is it about? And what does this mean? And how all these different approaches fit together? We're talking here, we're celebrating today or in these days, implementation of RDA. RDA as a framework standard is only a part of this universe. There are many other parts in this universe. And I would like to show you a bit how this fits together. But RDA is a big and important part in this universe, but it's not a standalone in itself. It's working and cooperating with others as well. Here we have to come to, and IFLA and Ahava mentioned the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions, called IFLA. IFLA has an important role in this play. And over longer than 50 years, IFLA working groups are working on standards, developing, creating standards to various subject areas in libraries, and sometimes a bit broader, but mostly for libraries, as the name of the institution is saying. And these international standards, an IFLA standard has always to be international. There will be never a national standard in IFLA. It's always to be as international as it can be, because this is an essential part of the IFLA strategy. And they are published, they are approved by IFLA committees, they are published, they are open access, and it's important that they are regularly reviewed. We will come back to such a review for a certain example later on, but That's the role, one of the most, IFLA has other topics and other roles as a global, very global institution, up to human rights and free access for everybody to collections. But standardization, international standards is an essential part of IFLA's work. What is the most basic international standard, let's say, for cataloging? And following up, we will only talking about cataloging. That's our topic. And there, I think you all know it, the international cataloging principles. And I would like to underline the word principle. These are very basic principles. And when you have a look at this paper, you can have a look at this on the IFLA website. This is a very small thing. It's not about like RDA, about if you would print it out 1,000 of pages. It's just some pages, it's a small thing, but these are the basic principles, and they were first published in the 16th of the last century as a statements of principles, and it was in Paris, so perhaps they have a parallel title as Paris Principles. So you can say, oh, how old this is, it's not up to date. But as these are principles, very basic principles, they are up to date until nowadays as basics. They were regularly updated, as it is it's a demand of IFLA to actualize the standards regularly, every 5 years, something about this. So they were updated in 2009 and in 2016, and you can see the importance of these basic principles. They are having numerous translations. They are all published on the IFLA website. And this was the first international guideline for the development of cataloging rules. And if you can have a look at several standards, you will see that they all are based on these ICP, on these international cataloging principles. Just an information for you, they are currently under revision. It's a fundamental revision. It's not published for the time being, but a first draft is worked out and will be approved at the end of the day by the Committee on Standards of IFLA, but now it was provided for the cataloging section, which is responsible for the ICP. But just an information for you, it will come up an actualization, but the basics and the principles will be the same as they were. What's the content of these ICP principles? As I said, they have an eye on the objectives and purpose of the catalog and the consistent use of cataloging standards. These are one of the basic demands and approaches of the ICP. And I gave you here a citation of the not yet approved draft of the revised version of the ICP. And here you can see that there is a change according what is important nowadays. The principles of this statement are intended to guide the development of conceptual models or cataloging codes and the decisions that catalogers make. They apply to current library catalogs, bibliographies, and other data sets created by libraries. As the information landscape is shifting towards linked data, the principles enable both traditional cataloging practices relying on bibliographic and authority data and linked data approaches. And this is an important thing in the introduction of the new version. You may understand that in the middle of last century, linked data wasn't a topic at all. It is nowadays, it is important. And so they will be mentioned in the actualized version in the ICP that will be published perhaps next year or the year after. Just for your information to know that they will be adapted to modern demands and approaches. They have these objectives and purpose, and I listed them here to you. These are very basic things, you can say, but that's clear, there's nothing to discuss about. Data elements should be relevant and useful. Sure, they should be. no question. But it's good to have these basics written in such a principle paper that everybody can rely them, can keep them in mind, can see them and can say, oh, yeah, I'm here developing a new standard for new purposes, for example. But I can go through this and can say, my new standard or the standard I would like to provide is this, like, are the demands of the ICP are fulfilled here in my new work. And all the standards are doing this, and so we have a common basis. Let's go a step forward, but when we talk about here now about the IFLA library reference model, it's based on the ICP. So the IFLA library reference model is following these international cataloging principles. IFLA library reference model is not as old as the ICP, so it has predecessor models. Perhaps you know the names, these Ferber models. FR is always an abbreviation for functional requirements. There were different types of functional requirements, and the working group concerned with these models decided to have them in one. And so over several years, they provided these IFLA library reference model, IFLA LRM, in 2016. It was published, approved, and published a year later on. And it was the first time with this library reference model that it strongly considers user requirements and the use of linked data environments. So you can see there's a big change. Before the Ferber, the functional requirements like Ferber, Fred, and Frazette, they didn't have this explicit view to linked data. The library reference model defines user tasks. These are the one I think everybody nowadays knows them: find, identify, select, obtain, and explore. The first four ones are coming from the ICP. They took them into the LRM, and explore came up new to it to discover resources using the relationships between them, and thus place the resources in a context. Here you can see perhaps a bit these linked data background that we are going to, or we are trying to go to nowadays. What are the core concepts of this library reference model? These are the definition of entities and their attributes and the relationships they are having between themselves. That's a very simple thing when you have a look at this. I try to give you here an example. A big boy with red hair has a small sister with brown hair. You have a boy and you have a girl, and each of them, the boy have some attributes. For example, here, red hair, you can choose whatever you want. And the girl has an attribute. She has brown hair. The relationship between themselves is those of sister and brother. And you can broaden up this with many attributes and relationships. And that's what linked data is doing. It brings you from one thing to another, to the next, via this system of relationships. And with the concept of attributes, you can describe your entity in what way you ever want, more precisely, less precisely, whatever you want to do. That's a really simple example, but that's how it starts, and you can broaden it up in many ways. Let's come to the world of standards. Just for an example here, two big committees, associations, institutions providing standards. I mentioned IFLA. The other worldwide standard you'll note is RDA, with the committees behind the RDA, providing RDA and the RDA toolkit. These are the RDA steering committee and the RDA board. So what we are having now, we are having principles like the ICP, we have models like the LRM, and we have different standards like RDA as a standard coming from the RAC and the RDA board. And another standard, I put here the example of the new upcoming ISBDM, which is an IFLA standard. So we have a confusion and a chaos of things. And when I started to work in this part of the library of the Bibliographic Universe, I was confused at myself. When I started in this work in standardization, I thought, what is this now? These many abbreviations we are all suffering from, that's sure. What is it now? Is it a standard? Is it a model? And we had a big and broad discussion in the cataloging section many years ago. And we had to recognize that even we sitting, you may know, in such an IFLA section in committees, these are experts, the people coming from big libraries, long-lasting librarians, they have a lot of expertise. And there was such a confusion. What is this? Is this now a standard? And what's a standard? And what is a best practice? And what, I don't know. And we thought we have to bring it in an order. And I tried to bring it for you here now in a certain order. And I called it a hierarchy. We have on the top, we have such things, such principles, like the ISBD as an example. These are just examples, maybe others. Very basic principles. You cannot use them in daily cataloging work, not at all. Next, under the ICP in this hierarchy are models, like the LLM. They are describing very broadly, very detailed what is an entity, what is a relationship, attributes, and so on, but you cannot use them in daily work as well. Then we're coming a step further down in the hierarchy, and I brought you through the example of RDA as a basic standard, or some call it a framework standard. RDA is a big thing. You may know it. And sometimes it seems to be difficult to use it in daily cataloging work. And we know all who implemented RDA, and you will know it at best, I think, in your community, that you had to break it down to an application profile or whatever you call it, based on the basic standard RDA to use it in your daily work. At the end of my hierarchy example here, I put the example of the ISBDM, that's an IFLA standard. This is a concrete and prescriptive user standard. So we have to keep into account what we are coming from and have to think about where are we now when we are talking about standardization. So in this hierarchy, we have principles. They are just describing very principal basic things. We have the LLM, which is describing the entities. We have RDA, which forms the framework for very high quality data, very broad and high quality data. And we have something like the ISBDM forming the framework for standardized information. Let us have a closer look at the two examples I choose. RDA, sure, and the ISBDM, perhaps to make a bit clearer what is meant, where are the difference and where are the common things. RDA was developed now a bit of time ago, and since it was revised, it went through the 3R project, and what we are talking nowadays is the RDA toolkit, the official toolkit, which is published 2020. On the other side, the ISBDM is a successor of the existing ISBD. It's under work. Its a final draft is in discussion. Perhaps you noticed that there was a worldwide review. Perhaps some of you had a look on this first draft, and we expect to publish it, or if I expect to publish it in 2025 in the next year. RDA is very, very detailed. You can see it when you have a first glance at this standard, open up the toolkit, and you will say, oh my God, how detailed it is. The ISBDM will be, and it was kept tight and short, very much shorter as, for example, a standard like RDA is. RDA is very general and has many options. Why is this so? We decided to have this because it is a framework standard. You can use it in many different ways, in many different environments. And so you have this option to choose between these many options, what will fit for you, which on the other side means you have to do something. You cannot take it one-to-one. ISBDM on the other side is very prescriptive, as it was always, but it is fully harmonized with RDA. Keep into mind the picture of the hierarchy. It's under the framework standard ISBDM, and it was fully or is fully harmonized with RDA. And so, because RDA is fully harmonized with the LLM, the ISBDM is fully harmonized with the LLM itself through RDA. RDA covers all entities of the LLM. ISBDM don't. For the time being, it's only on the manifestation level, and expansion is planned. We have different, let's say, governance structures for these two standards. RDA is under governance of the two committees I mentioned, the RSC and the RDA board, and it's under a certain license. ISBDM as an IFLA standard has to be and will be freely available. RDA is constantly being further developed. That's basic for all standards we are having all around the world. They have to be further developed. Our world and the bibliographic universe, to use this term, is changing faster and faster. And so every standard has to be adapted, actualized, and further developed for further needs. ISBDM is on a first draft. As I said, we had a review process to get comments for these drafts, but when it will be published, yes, that it has to be revised regularly itself. For RDA, we are much more steps further on. There's a fixed procedure to make changes to the standard. It's described on the RSC website. You can send proposals, discussion papers. That's what we are doing. Ahava, as European representative, she's bringing proposal or discussion papers into the discussion of the RSC, or they are commenting and bringing in the comments from Europe as the European representative. There's a fixed and very approved procedure. For ISBDM, you can say there is not for the time being a fixed procedure, but it will be according to the guidelines if they're having on that self. Internationality, it's very much important for many standards, not all. For RDA explicitly, we are working since years to bring RDA to more internationality and to make it available for all communities worldwide. And that's why we are having several working groups on several topics, which are for the time being not at all international in RDA as it is for the time being. And we are very hard working on this. ISBDM, as not such a broad standard, is not as far in this, but they started with an international examples working group. This is the first step towards internationality. Just here, just 2 slides to show you. You can see, you have a look at this afterwards. I try to do it with this small pictures, and you can see some are smiling, some are not smiling. So you can see there is a lot to do. For linked data applications, those standards should be fine. For other cultural institutions, for example, not for the time being. There will be a lot to do, but all these topics we are keeping in mind, and we will work on this further on. So to summarize a bit what I would like to show with these examples, I call it compatibility despite differences. It's obvious in our times that different standards are needed. for different communities, for different target groups. Perhaps 10 or 20 years ago, we had the dream that there will be a one-fits-all. There will be one standard for all communities, for all types of resources. But I think the goal was not achieved in this. It was a bit sort of a dream, and it was a fine goal to have, to going towards. But we will need different standards, but they have to be compatible to each other. And there we can come back here at this point to the models and principles. The compatibility can be guaranteed if all standards follow the same models and principles. And that's what I would like to show with the examples here with the ISPD and RDA. They are both based on the ICP and the LRM, and so they are, and ISPDM as a more user standard is based on RDA itself, so they are compatible, and there is no contradiction. Means at the same time that the bodies which are responsible, in our examples, the RSC and the IFLA, the ISPD review group, for example, they have to work together, they have to cooperate. The RSC is very keen and is working a lot on having such cooperations. We have the tool of having official protocols for this work. So we signed in the last year an official protocol, the RSC and the IFLA Committee on Standards, an official protocol regulating our cooperation. Why with the IFLA Committee on Standards? In the IFLA Committee on Standards is the top committee for standards, all standards from IFLA, whatever they are tackling with. May it be there are standards for babies and toddlers, whatever you can see on the website, is coming to the Committee on Standards, and so the RSC is close to all what's happening there, and to all that can have knowledge and can comment and can talk to the people from the Committee on Standards to talk about all our standards. RSC has further protocols, for long-lasting protocols, for example, with the ISSN International Center, because serial is always a topic. With MARC Advisory Committee, we have to talk about formats as well, even if the RSC is a format-free standard. And we're just starting a cooperation with the BibFrame community. What's about the models and principles? Are they static? Yes and no. Basic models also needs to evolve. It's important that they have to be adapted to new needs or requirements, but they cannot be changed immediately, just very often, and in many things we have to be very careful about this. Let me say, we had last year, when we had the IFLA conference in Rotterdam, we talked about the LRM and changes in the LRM. And when you came back now to the picture of the hierarchy, everything depends. All the standards are depending on such a model as the LRM. If there will be a change in the LRM, we have to adapt it down through all these hierarchy steps. So the responsible committee for the LRM has to be very careful, and have to be very open for changes. Sure, they have to be adapted for further communities, for example, for archives and museums purposes. But that's why we have the cooperation is so important to have, that we talk at a very early step, we talk to each other, and we have a common understanding what we would like to change and how and in what time. What are now the to-dos for the near future in standardization work and internationalization? That's clear cooperation with all the standardizing bodies we can. We have to have a look for community-based application profiles, and we have much more broadening up our focus on cultural heritage outside the libraries. One topic you have to talk everywhere now because everybody will ask to, can AI help? It was last year in Rotterdam at the IFLA conference. It was shouting out at every corridor, oh, we will go to AI and AI will solve all our problems, especially responsible people in libraries, library directors and managers. They were very happy about it. It seems not to be so easy as it sounds for the first initially. AI can help us a lot. In some parts, in others, it will not. At this slide, I summarized you what a machine can and what a man can. You see and the most profit of machines is that they can work with an incredible high quantity of data in an incredible speed. Man will never can, but but machines will never understand rules and can make interpretations. That's a big difference to keep it in mind for what you use AI. So I think we will have to think from the collection or the purposes we are having. One collection will be fine to be tackled with machine, with AI, others really not. Medieval manuscripts, I think perhaps not. Other collections who can have a profit from both. So that's what we have to think about. AI can never be used, I think, for working out principles or models. It may help for working out standards. It may help to work application profiles and to creating notes or further informations to bibliographic information. It may be very useful. And I know many examples in libraries where it's used for such things, and that's very effective. But a combination of everything that may be the solution. At last, some personal things. People are doing all these work. People are working out models and principles and all these things. So what do we need? We need people. And what kind of people? We have to be open-minded, perhaps much more than librarians were a long time ago. We have to work together, and we need both. We need, when in the German National Library, for example, when we skipped over to RDA, it's about 10 years ago again as well. So there were many older colleagues who said, I will retire. I'm useless now. I'm completely useless now. No, they aren't. We need these experience of where we are coming from the traditional cataloging. There will always be, may it be a small part of our collection that has to be worked on in a very traditional way, in a very broad way. The description has to be broad and very intellectual based. And we need both the experience, the knowledge of new technologies and new forms of publication. And we have to be open for other cultural institutions, which means as well that we can exist what they did and their experience and their traditions. I think that's the way we should go. My conclusion is no one fits all. Cooperation and participation is maybe the solution for the next years. So thank you a lot for your attention, and perhaps you'll have some questions.
So far, there are no questions in the Q&A. I remind you to please put them in there in English or in Hebrew. I will say, though, that our colleagues from the Haifa area missed some of the presentation because they had to run to the safe room in the middle of the
I'm so
presentation
sorry for you.
and stay there for 10 minutes after the sirens were out. So with your permission, Renate, I will also, since this webinar was recorded, I will send out, once I have the link to the recording, Renate's slides, and then if people have questions that they didn't think of now, or
sure,
have after they review the material that they missed, I will gather it all together and send you questions and send back to everyone answers. But feel
Yes,
free.
I will be more than happy to get your questions. And on the last slide is my email address, and you can find it on the RSC website. And I will be more than happy to answer your questions or your comments. We are always happy to get some feedback from colleagues all around the world, and to think about what we are doing. And that's a sort of an evaluation, and we need this feedback. We need it.
And this is my opportunity to put in a good word for participation in the RSC working groups. That's one of the ways that our communities can get messages over to the RSC, besides the formal process of going through your local communities to the representatives of the different areas. If you want to get in at the very basics of changing RTA, that's the point. In the Israeli community, in the past, we've had Amit Niv and Chanoch Rogniger on RSC committees. We have David Roth, who's the chair of the Religions Working Group. We're on the AI Joint Working Group, and soon we'll be starting an Archives Working Group.
Yeah.
If anyone has recommendations of people for the Archives Working Group, please send them to Renate.
Yeah, and it's good. It's fine. Thank you, Ahava, that you mentioned the RSC working groups. These are very, very important steps towards internationalization. And I'm very happy that all these working groups, we are reached to have colleagues from all around the world. We have as well an examples working group for RDA, and there are people from all around the world working in this. And Ahava mentioned the other ones. You can see them all on the RSC website. If you are interested in the work of the RSC and the working groups, we will have the meeting in November. It's all on the RSC website on the news. News. It's the news section. There is an invitation to the public session we will have. You can join it virtually. When we are discussing about a discussion paper about proposals, when there will be a report about the working groups, we will have an outreach day in Washington, which will be hybrid as well. So you can join or you can listen to the recording. If you would like to inform yourself about the working groups, and I'm saying as a European, I'm always making this casting because for me it's so important that not only Anglo-American colleagues, they are good, they are experts on their own, but it does not make sense if they provide all solutions for the rest of the world. And I would like to mention one thing: don't hesitate if you're not a native English speaker. I'm not. I have to admit, it's not easy, it's hard. And sometimes, and perhaps you may think, we have this problem in Latin America. When you will have a look at the RSC website, you will notice that in the RSC, we don't have actually a representative from Latin America and the Caribbean. And they are always saying to me, our English is not good enough. I don't dare to work in such an international working group with my English language skills. Don't hesitate. We have, and as Europeans, we are knowing this very well, we have different languages, and that's fine. That's a cultural heritage we are having. And don't hesitate. The Anglophone people, they are always very nice and very friendly. And they have to take this into account. If we are doing mistakes, if we are talking more slowly than they are doing, don't hesitate. They get used to it. Yurik is a good example for this. Everybody is talking with a different accent, and that's so nice. And you can always say, oh, I didn't get it. Can you repeat it, please? Doesn't matter. Don't be so shy. Just join a working group if you have a certain expertise and interest to bring things forward. And let's say the Anglo-American person, they are always nice. And if you say, speak a bit more, not so fast or something like this, don't hesitate based on this. Just have a look at this. And if you would like have a certain expertise, I would like to bring things forward, just join us.
Thank you again, Renata. There are no questions. So again, feel free afterwards to send questions directly to Renata or to send to me, and I will send them as a group to Renata. International people, I will send you information the next time we have an English language session within our webinars. And for the community, those who are celebrating the Tishrei holidays, Gmar Chatima Tova, and stay safe. Thank you so much, Renata, for joining us, and thank you all for celebrating with the Israeli community.
Thank you so much. And all the best for you all. All the best. We're keeping you in our hearts.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.